I'm here with Monica Guzmán. Monica, thank you so much for joining with me today.
Hey, Daniel. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. Nice to be here.
Likewise, likewise. All right, let's just start by having you tell us a little bit about who you are and what gets you up in the morning.
I like that question. That's a fun form of it. Yeah, so I am a mom and a wife and a Seattleite and a Latina and a Mexican immigrant. But what gets me up in the morning and keeps me oh so busy is work across the political divide. The way I think of it is I help people stay curious when it's really hard, but really important. And the political divide is right at the top of that list these days for a lot of folks. I am personally and professionally obsessed with helping people understand each other, with the puzzle of that, with the intense mystery that we all represent to each other. And my experience as a journalist, most of my career, has shown me both how profound that mystery is, how fascinating people are, and also how easy it is to get each other wrong and the dire consequences of that.
Mm, I guess I think that people often tend to want to say that we are in a hyperbolic moment and that things are worse than they have ever been. And especially with respect to polarization and lack of understanding across the divide. In your experience, I know you've been sort of operating in this space for, I don't know. I mean, and I want to hear, about what got you into your book. Obviously, you wrote your book in 2022, but I know you were working on this stuff and thinking about it before then. Do you feel like things are worse now than they have been in your experience, or has it reached a high water mark and it's getting better? What's that trajectory like been for you?
Yeah, I think since I started thinking about these themes, which I started really back in 2015, 2016 with that campaign, I think there's two things happening at the same time. One, the viciousness of the worst of our divides seems to be getting worse. We're creeping towards some metrics we don't want to see, like political violence. But at the same time, the consciousness and awareness of the underlying dynamics that cause all of these things, including and especially our own internal habits, is increasing too. So there's so much more awareness of the problem, even as the problem appears to grow. And because an awareness of the problem reveals not just the contours of the divisions, but the delusions that make us think we're more divided than we really are. I I don't know. It's like we're getting smarter as the whole is growing deeper.
That's fascinating. I'm reminded of what famous Nobel Prize winning psychologist Danny Kahneman used to talk about, where he people would ask him like, so like, you spent your life like studying these all the biases and the ways that the human mind goes wrong. Do you feel like it's improved your own decision making at all? And he's like, no, not at all. Like,
Yeah.
being aware of all of these biases, I still succumb to them. And so it sounds like, I don't know if you'd agree, but it sounds a little bit like we are simultaneously continuing to fall into this morass of distrust and division, and yet we are becoming more aware of those
Mhm.
that distrust, but that awareness is somehow only is not somehow not helping, or do you think the
Mm.
awareness does help?
I think the awareness does help. I
Okay.
think it's always better to know that you are falling than to be falling unconsciously. It means that more of us have the opportunity to stop, notice, and then choose. Because I don't think you can really be an agent of your own activity, your own piece of this dynamic, unless you're mindful of what the heck is going on and what's stirring up inside you, what, certain kind of desire to belong or attach to a tribe or not be judged or not be under threat, what all those things are pushing you to do or not do. But so long as those things are unconscious, as my friend Wilk Wilkinson likes to say, it's about making sure that your emotions don't dictate your actions, right? So as soon as you bring awareness into any kind of emotional moment, aha, now you have the opportunity to make a choice. And if you are aware of the opportunity to make a choice in a given moment, it's a lot more likely you'll make a good one. So
Mm,
I see it as, now you might say, well, how well does that scale? And that's the piece of it, right? We all want to change our culture, but it's impossible to do that programmatically. None of us control culture. I think is one of the most profound and beautiful mysteries of of the human world, actually.
mhm,
Is like even
mhm.
the people with the most money and power that just want to change the culture actually can't. You
Yeah.
can't do it predictably. So to me, what that tells me is this whole idea of starting small and starting with the self and starting with individual actions and behaviors is actually quite sane. It's actually the we know that that's the seeds of whatever culture is and does.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I also so some of the work we're doing at the Beacon Project right now and at More in Common is thinking about political culture and thinking about yeah, how do we change those expectations and norms, the way that the things that we expect of ourselves and of each other. And there's something about the way that you phrase that that I think is exactly right, which is that almost precisely because it is so daunting, because it is so massive and so outside of our control, there's almost a kind of a uh, an excitement there because it's like actually the change could come from anywhere, and
Right. Exactly.
it's a chaotic system, and so small little effects can actually make an outsized impact in ways that you can't necessarily predict.
Exactly. So I think the more awareness there is, the higher the likelihood that the folks who will end up being models for others to follow will become activated in that role. And we just want I want the lab to happen. I want lots of little experiments to happen. And even if
Mm.
most of them are obscure, if only one of them takes off, that might be all we need.
So let's talk a little bit about what those changes, what sorts of changes that you're hoping to see, and I think that this would connect really well, obviously, to some of the things that you write in your wonderful book. I never thought of it that way. So, um, are there uh yeah? So tell me a little bit about what those changes, what changes you hope to see in the culture are.
Yeah. The number one thing is I want to see more people practice curiosity in more moments. So, what that means across our political divide is that when we begin interacting with someone, discover that we disagree, all kinds of things begin to happen. Our minds start to shut down to learning very much from them, other than learning more reasons for why they're awful, for example, or more ways to affirm or confirm our priors about them and about how wrongheaded they are. So, that kind of mindset keeps us in this really vicious cycle where we're judging each other more while we're engaging each other less. And if you press fast forward on that movie, right, judging each other more, engaging each other less, you have to ask where those judgments are coming from. What are those judgments even based on? Well, they don't, less and less are they based on actual interactions with actual people who have the actual ideas that actually make the world go around. More and more they are based on proxies for all of that, including media signals, signals from our like-minded fellows, many of whom, because we spend so much time just steeped in our fears as well as our concerns and our hopes and our ideas, um, we end up and research shows this, and you've seen it because you've done a lot of it. We end up misperceiving um, what those ideas even are in the first place. And so we consider ourselves here in the United States of America, a real world leader in treating ideas responsibly. And we're slipping from that capacity the more that we do this. So I think curiosity is the number one cognitive tool that will dig us out of this because again, through my experience as a journalist, but just as a human, because I don't think you have to be a journalist to know how powerful questions are. Um, Nothing is more powerful than a question, a perceptive question, to break down barriers between people, if even for just a moment. I think we underestimate the power of conversation. Conversation is so transformative. And look, it's harder to do when people are more afraid, when people are more distant in their minds and in actuality, of course, but it's still not impossible. So conversations between two people who are able to build the traction, even just in that moment, can do a lot. They can do the kinds of things that thinkers on thought pieces on the internet have said are just like, that's never going to happen. It's like, well, put two people in a room together and get them to just be real with each other, and you just never know. So curiosity in the context of a conversation, in particular in the context of a one-to-one conversation, absolutely transformative. And fewer of us taste that because of what we're seeing in the dynamics of our technology and how we tend to communicate with each other so much more on social media. The volume of our words is going through all these digitized spaces where we can't use the full complement of human communication tools. So we're really cheating ourselves out of that spontaneous discovery of the truth that is in each other's hearts. Instead, we're accepting proxies and signals. So only curiosity, only asking questions of those assumptions that are getting hard baked into us, often unconsciously, is going to help us take a shovel and dig out of this hole. Actually, wait, does that work? No, it's not a shovel. We need a rope. There we go. Better analogy.
Yeah. No, yeah. When you're down in that hole, I don't know how much a shovel's good. I mean, you could build a ramp out maybe, but a rope might help, or a ladder. No, that's beautifully put. So, I can hear some of the skeptical voices in my head saying, how could she say that? What do you say to people who say, how can I possibly be curious and open-minded about someone who is threatening my bodily safety?
Right.
What I'm sure you've gotten this question before. How do you respond or make sense of that critique of your point of view?
Yeah, that is one of the open questions that I continue to explore. So I try to treat as many things as I possibly can as open questions and not get to conclusions, because that one comes from a lot of pain. And usually questions born from pain have so many different origin points that it's impossible to give one answer that satisfies or addresses everything behind that question. So I want to make that really clear. But from some of the origin points that I have witnessed, because I have gotten that question a lot, and I ask myself that question a lot. I don't even need anybody else to ask it. It's all around us. There's various entry points. One that comes to mind is the impact of fear. Fear has saved us. It's a superpower. We're all descendants of people who ran away from the proverbial bear instead of asking how fuzzy it was. Thank goodness for that, right? But what we know neurobiologically is that comes at a price. When you're afraid, your cognitive resources move towards survival. The trauma responses, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And those are all meant to protect us in one way or another. But as I once heard somebody pass on to me, and I don't know the origin of this quote, but I think it's very wise. Don't waste your fear on anything but danger. Don't waste your fear on anything but danger. In other words, the question really does become, is it danger or is it discomfort? Is it and we've come into an era where that question itself is very controversial, and it is safer just not to dig into the nuances of it. And it is safer to say that if somebody feels in danger, they are in danger, and that's the end of the conversation. I don't think that's serving us very well. I think we need to question our fears, too. So does that mean that there aren't, people so consumed by hate that they are worth fearing? No, of course not. There are. But the research I've seen, and I know the research you've seen, shows that it's a lot less than we think. So it is highly likely that many of our fearful reactions of self-protection are based on undue fear and overestimated danger. So that means that our fear responses are coming in and blocking cooperation, blocking curiosity, blocking collaboration where they actually could help a lot. In fact, in my experience, a lot of the folks who would otherwise say, going across the divide would increase my fear, discover just the opposite. That when they cross the divide, and look, they don't go to the scariest possible person first. That's silly. You do it bit by bit, right? But that over time, the world becomes less scary because you have had real interactions with people who hold ideas that were a bit scary to you. And again, I want to make really, really clear that this is a gradient, folks. This is not, let's, you talk to the scariest person, as I once put it, it's a bit crass, but like, I'm not saying go talk to a Nazi tomorrow. I'm not saying that.
Mhm.
I'm saying find your edge and start there. Your edge, whatever it happens to be. Nobody can tell you who you can and can't talk to. And not to mention, let's also be really practical about another piece, because again, there's hundreds of pieces to this question. But another piece is those trauma responses, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Once those come up, it's pretty difficult to get curious while you are afraid, you know? So that's going to be the end of the conversation anyway. So if you find yourself in a place where you feel so under threat, remove yourself from that conversation. Start somewhere else. Start somewhere less, reactive for you. That's okay. But I think if too many of us sort of presume that we are in danger and that our reactions will always be prohibitive, or we just tell ourselves we already know how the other people will react and there's nothing to learn, I think we're headed to a very dark place together if too many of us accept that without taking risks. And, there's that word that's also like a deep mystery. Try to have some courage.
Mm, yeah. So you wrote your book in 2022, and it it is really based off my sense about it is that it was deeply inspired by some of the conversations that you've had with your parents, and navigating some of the differences there. So maybe you could just share a little bit about what that journey has been like for you and what it was like leading up to writing the book. And then I'd also be curious to see how your relationship with your parents has evolved, if at all, since the book was published.
Yeah. It is deeply inspired by my parents. So, like I said, I'm a Mexican immigrant, so are they. And we became citizens in the year 2000. When I was 17, I got automatically naturalized because they studied up and took the test and did well. Uh, and they immediately became Republicans and started putting up lawn signs and things like this. And
Like right away.
yeah,
Oh, like
immediately.
no like it
It
was
just
just
right then and there. With the citizenship ceremony was the summer of 2000, so there was an election. So yeah, there we go. I think it was Bush Cheney. Like, let's go, and then that
and y'all were
was
living in the States prior to that.
uh
Or you moved to
yes.
the they
So we moved to the States from Mexico in 1989, I
Mhm.
believe, 1988 or 1989. So yeah, we'd been in the country for a while as, green card holders, visa holders, and then green card holders, and then finally citizens. But yeah, my parents were very clearly Republican, and I just hadn't thought about that, but as soon as they were Republican, I realized I'm very Democrat. Like even as a 17-year-old, I was like, this is, whoa, okay. And then a bunch of things started to make sense about our debates around the dinner table at the time about welfare and Clinton and all these things. And I just had a different sensibility, but I didn't realize that it was going to result in a really different political approach to everything. And it did. And boy, so there were, as I wrote in the book, just lots of scenes that come up for me and my brother. Sometimes we remember, arguments in the car after watching political documentaries like what Michael Moore did back in the aughts, and just the front seat versus the back seat. And it was just exhausting. It was brutal. All four of us, even my dad, who's quite reserved most of the time, like we wake up when it comes to these things and we get into it. We're very
Oh, y'all
unfiltered
like
with each
as a
other.
family, this is like
Mm. Oh, nobody holds back. We're yeah, like my friends growing up have pointed this out that a lot of families, I don't know, maybe it's a bit cultural. I hate to be too stereotypical, but a lot of families, they're just kind of very civil and very, it's just everything's very nice, and we're
huh?
not going to talk about that kind of thing.
Right,
My
right.
family is not one of those families.
No, y'all get into it.
We get into it. We always have, and for better or worse, and there's definitely yelling, and it's not like we're zen, masters of understanding at all. But we get into it every time, and so we work through it, like, one way or another,
Mhm.
every time. And so we were kinda conditioned for that, and I think in a way that helped. But then the 2016 presidential campaign came, and things got really intense, as they did for so many around the country. And, to make a long story short, but please ask me to elaborate on anything you'd like, the intensity of that for me was really impactful, because at that point I felt a lot of emotional agony. as I think a lot of folks on the blue side, on the Democratic side, felt about folks who would make the different choice, and those included my parents. And I had been a practicing journalist for a long time, and so I asked questions. That's the way I understood people who I was trying to explain to a community in my journalism. So I said, okay, like this is what this is what I do. Let me do that with my parents. And it wasn't even necessarily a strategy. It was just kind of the automatic thing. So, one thing led to another, and I really did get to the point where I realized that if I were them, I would vote for him too. And that was right, given that I want my parents to have agency and freedom, and that I want their lives to cohere. And I have had conversations with them, and I know that they look at the world so differently, and they really genuinely hold these different ideas about what would be better for our country. And I live in a country that is better than my native-born country when it comes to that liberty and freedom and how important that is, and I hold that really highly. And I realized, like, yeah, okay, I really strongly disagree, but because I've had these conversations, I don't disagree with them as people. I don't see them as villains. I don't, I love them.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm not, it built like a kind of resistance to so many signals from, I know the term that I love is conflict entrepreneurs. Amanda Ripley, an
Hmm.
author, coined that term, but conflict entrepreneurs out there, it'd be really nice if we all just saw people on the other side as evil, because it's easier to mobilize the one versus the other for any kind of ends. None of which is to say that, look, of course, I'm not a relativist. I think that there are ultimately right and wrong answers here, but I don't think that truth is usefully seen in society unless we look for it together. Like,
Hmm.
it really comes down to that for me. And
Hmm.
if we are only looking for truth apart from the people that we think just are disqualified from it, truth is never going to be effective. And then persuasion loses its grip. We rely on persuasion. The founders wanted to make sure persuasion could travel, that we had channels, to argue and really despise each other. If you look back at how Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson treated each other way back in the beginning, the tensions that they explored are still with us, and they were not nice to each other. Being mean is not a disqualifier for American citizenship and participation. It's not just about trying to boost civility, because it is important. It's also about boosting capacity to handle incivility. Why don't we talk about that? You know,
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
can't shove each other out of the ring because they're misbehaving. We have to understand what emotions do to us and get curious about them too. If someone's getting really animated and starting to be mean, boy, they must care about something a lot, and they must think it's under threat. What are they trying to protect? How can we soften these edges? And we can't do it from a distance. We just can't. Anyway, I'm getting back on my soapbox. What was the question again?
No, no, that was wonderful, and it just brought up so many thoughts for me. One one thought that just occurred to me is, both you and I both, I think there's a parallel in the way that you were approaching the way that you describe your parents. Obviously, I'm a psychologist, and we at More in Common think about political polarization through the lens of core beliefs, and core beliefs, they allow you to kind of cut underneath, go below the surface a little bit, and really try to understand what are the unique worldviews and values and motivations and experiences that people have had that lead them to the truth that they hold, and that allows you
Yes.
to kind of like sit with the surface level stuff, all those things that are like, okay, these are the things we really disagree about, but let's actually go, let's dig below that and say, okay, where and I really like also just the way that you're talking about these different angles to truth, because because I think that there's a real case to be made that all of these multifarious approaches, these to truth, these different experiences, the emergent property of those is what allows us to move closer, and that only if you only have a single view, that you're going to be missing part of the equation or part of the story. And so we're all sort of fumbling in this sort of fractious fractious community, but all sort of moving as a group together towards this higher, better
That's right.
feeling of truth or a better society.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
absolutely.
We kind of need each other in that way, I
We
guess.
really do. I find that one of the hardest. I think of a lot of tips in my work. I try to boil things down to an actual tactic or technique that you can use in a conversation, or when you feel a certain way, try saying this, try doing that. I'm trying to make this stuff accessible to people.
Yeah.
And what I think of as a really one of the hardest but maybe most important tips, and it sounds like something you learn in kindergarten. It sounds so simple. Learn together. Learn together.
Mm-hmm.
I've got my phone with me over here. We are conditioned by our technologies to think that getting information is a solo act. That's what it's conditioned us to think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
me in front of the computer, reading the text,
exactly.
and then
Mm-hmm.
putting it back in, saying my post or saying my thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all a solo act. It's me talking with myself and mixed in with all the fears and concerns about how I'll be perceived. That's
Yes.
what it
Right.
is.
Right.
So I find that some of the most amazing moments, and I'm trying to do this more in my own life, and I'm trying to encapsulate it as something that I can like help other people see the opportunities to do in their own lives, is when, you're out there chatting and there's somebody like a little bit different from you. It's not even a big deal, but like something comes up that happened in the news and you have a little bit of a disagreement, like, what was it? Or I don't know. It was this. No, it was this. If somebody manages to say, "Oh, hold on, let's look it up," like really, really, and it fits the dynamic, because often that's too disruptive. But if it
Mm-hmm.
isn't, you
Mm-hmm.
look it up, but you don't just look it up for yourself. You sidle up next to that person and go, look. Okay, I've Googled it.
Uh-huh.
And which of these sources do you like? I don't know. Should I click this one? Let's click this one. Okay. Oh, but you don't like
Wow.
this source? Oh, let me look at that one. And I've done this.
The
It's
joint
amazing.
search. I've
The
never done that
joint
before.
search. Oh, it like learning together. I just think that's the main thing, because literally searching for truth together on even the smallest things starts to cut into this idea that we are all these isolated little nodes, making decisions and coming to our own understandings apart from each other, and then just going to social media to express and proclaim those understandings such as we have them and try to score points. This isn't working. So yeah, learning together is really hard and really important. My mother and I have done that. You asked about the relationship with my parents.
Yeah.
I remember the day Roe v. Wade was overturned, I called her. I often, a lot of people find this weird, but I often call her in moments of sort of political struggle for myself. And she felt very differently. She was overjoyed about Roe v. Wade being overturned, and I was crying. But in that conversation, we were talking about things, and I remember that one of the offshoots of what happened was, could this be a precedent that the Supreme Court could ultimately follow to do something like overturning gay marriage? And I brought that up, and my mom said, no. And I said, no, yeah. And we ended up going, she was somewhere else, but we both went to the computer and looked it up, and she went, oh, I didn't know about that angle.
Mm.
That kind of sucks. And I was like, yeah, it does. She's like, oh, okay. And so I was able to see in that conversation, her joy was really genuine, right? Like for her, it's you're saving human lives. And I totally get that.
Mm-hmm.
And she could see that my worry and fears were totally genuine. I don't want people to lose their rights. And she could totally get that. So we're learning together not just about the actual repercussions of an event, we're also learning about the real concerns and joys and hopes and fears of different kinds of people, right? And we're a pluralistic society. We have to have a grip on that. We have to. We have to learn together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can also imagine that there's something. I know there's a lot of research in social psychology about that experience of co-experiencing, and that there are qualities that has, there's an amplification of those experiences. If you feel, and I can imagine it would apply to learning too, where if you feel like what you're learning is the same thing that the other person is learning, then that's a kind of a connection between the two of you, as well as to
Exactly.
the source of knowledge. And so there's a sort of a triangle that gets created there that is
Yeah.
stronger than a line, I would imagine.
I love your term co-experience. I think that's right. It's also just
Yeah.
about sharing an experience and
Yeah.
the threads that build almost invisibly from that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So, let's talk a little bit about your work with Braver Angels and some of the work that's emerged after your book. So, tell us a little bit about Braver Angels and what you do with them.
So I'm an advisor at Braver Angels. When I first discovered this organization back in 2019, I was instantly called. I said, "This exists? This is something I thought couldn't exist, and it exists." It's a national grassroots organization working to depolarize America from the grassroots, and it's not about, let's try to change people's minds about the issues. It's what could we do to change people's minds about each other? Because the vilification and the dismissal is so intense and so unfounded on actual truth about what people believe that, we've got to start there. So it's ultimately an organization trying to build trust, where it has really dried up, so that we can do all the rest of it, right? Learning together. The mission of Braver Angels is right now really focused around courageous citizenship. What does it mean, to be a citizen and to employ courage to tie up these broken threads so that we can be a thriving society and have the lives we deserve, frankly, that we're building together. So it's ambitious. It's an ambitious project. There's all kinds of programs, from our signature debates to workshops. There's skill building workshops, all kinds of discussions. But the bread and butter, the real heart of Braver Angels is its alliances. These are localized chapters. There's like, I don't know, 120, 130 all across the country, and they're all co-led by liberals and conservatives. So this thing that our politicians can't do, you know, um, these like regular people who've just, for their own reasons, they've had it, or they've experienced the pain of political dissolution in their families, or they've experienced the dysfunction in their communities and want to do something about it. Who knows? For all kinds of reasons, they've just come to this work.
Yeah.
And the alliances are everything. They're amazing. So one of the things I'm doing right now at Braver Angels that I'm really excited about is I'm a debate chair. So I mentioned the signature Braver Angels debates, which are like, the debates you think of, in that they're really rigorous and robust and structured, but they are not like the debates you think of, in that there is no winner or loser. There's no crowned victor of anything. Instead, it's a collective search for truth. It is learning together, actualized. And it was actually when I first came to a Braver Angels debate back in 2020, and it was about the COVID lockdowns. And I witnessed people hearing each other because they too were being heard. And I saw the enormous power of that. Where somebody, when you build a space where somebody can share their convictions all the way, and that same person then is motivated to hear someone else's convictions out all the way, even if that other person is completely opposed to them, and that's everything. And so
Hmm.
those debates do that over and over and over again. So I have learned the rules, because they are strict, to the structure. We police the structure, not the content. It is extremely free speech oriented. And a lot of people think that that would be really scary and wouldn't work. Come check it out. Come check it out. It will move you.
Amazing. I wonder. So one experience that I have had over the last maybe 10 years of my own sort of political trajectory is that as I encounter more points of view from the other side, I end up feeling confused, and then eventually end up kind of feeling as though I don't um really belong in either camp. And I'm wondering, what has been, do you feel like you have describe yourself as a liberal, a Seattle liberal, do you feel like your own political views have evolved over the last, through your work with this, or do you feel like you've managed to kind of maintain a fairly robust sense of your own political convictions, even through and despite these engagements with people from other
Mm.
sides of the political divide?
Yeah. I believe that I have gotten to know my deeply held values better because they have been tested by deeper relationships and engagements with folks who end up with, have different politics. And because of those deeper engagements, we surface our values, we see where they're shared, but then we see where I have a value that I rank more highly than they do on some particular issue. And it's like I'm discovering myself more. I mean, that's one thing that I think we miss. A lot of the times in this sort of pluralism bridge building space, we talk about the benefits of this kind of work, and is learning more about others, but you learn a lot more about yourself, let me tell you, because that's one of the ways in which we are so divided, we're blinded. If we're spending more time with like-minded people, well, everybody assumes we all think alike. And so nobody's really rigorously testing and stress testing beliefs, which means we're not being called to think for ourselves as much as we could, right? So I feel like that has been a real benefit, where I know my politics better. I am still in the same place, I think, ultimately, that I was. Like, the political quizzes that I take online have not changed their results
Mhm. Mhm.
very much for me, except in one way. I remember taking one quiz, where some of the questions were about my animosity toward the other side. And I think because I didn't have that much animosity toward the other side, it thought that I was more on the right. And I was like, no, what is this? No, I have my convictions, and I don't hate the other side, and I don't think that they're evil. But I guess that's become rare enough that some research organizations are taking that as a variable. Please stop doing that.
Yeah.
We'll never get better
Right.
that way.
Right.
We'll just
Right.
think that we're
You only
that
count
we're
as a
being
you're only
infected or something.
you're only a real progressive if you hate
Exactly.
conservatives. Yeah.
What the heck is that? Yeah, man. So no, I have not meaningfully changed my politics, but I have very meaningfully changed how I think about the other side's politics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. um, do you think so? Before we were talking about sort of the concerns about discourse and dialogue and bridging from the perspective of psychological safety and physical safety. There's also kind of critiques about it that suggest that, from a strategic perspective, it doesn't help to listen to the other side. We have to defeat them. And the only way that we can defeat them is by steamrolling their points of view. What do you say to the people that criticize the notion of bridging from a purely politically strategic point of view?
Yeah, they've got it completely wrong. I think the longer I talk on podcasts, the more bold I get. But look, I mean, there's a softer way to get to that conclusion, but I think they have it completely wrong. The research I've done, the experiences I've had about how social change happens and how social movements find success is that squashing the other side, silencing the other side, trying to make sure that they can't speak to each other on certain platforms, it doesn't work. Well, human concerns will always find a way. I think about Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. Life finds a way.
Mm-hmm.
Ideas find a way. And I'm something close to a free speech absolutist for this reason. I don't think that, taking on this kind of scarcity mindset and this kind of closed system mindset where, let's just try to take control of what ideas are circulating and fight those other ideas by any means necessary, including attacking the character of the people, shaming them, trying to make them the villains, and, going up against, this other narrative and just continuing to fight that battle. I don't think that is effective. Especially because I think a lot of times those sets of strategies about let's just fight and let's dismiss this bridge building nonsense also mean that you're less likely to save any of your energy for actually encountering bravely real people from the other side. And if you don't save some of your energy, and it doesn't have to be you personally, like you can be the sloganer and the fighter, and maybe that's what you're good at. That's fine. Like, protesting is part of our democracy. Quashing other ideas is part of our democracy. It's all about the balance. I'm not saying none of this can ever happen. Like, I'm just saying if it's not in a balanced ecosystem, it's not going to work. But you've got to save some of your energy for encountering the other side openly, because if you don't, you are going to be fighting ghosts. You are going to be fighting projections. You are going to create this alien creature that is your opponent, and you're going to fight it, right? And you're going to aim all of the weapons that you've sharpened for that invented creature at real human beings who are not that, except you don't know it because of all the reasons, because you think it's a waste of time. Maybe some of you are too scared but are afraid to say it. I don't know what it is, but somebody in any advocate, anybody who wants to change the world, guess what? You've got to understand the world first. You've just got to. Somebody has to know what world you're trying to change. And if you are caught in your own, the more time people spend online with like-minded people, the more certain they feel about how their folks see the world, and the harder it is to understand how others see it. How can you change, minds beyond that small subset of the folks who are already with you if you don't understand what waters they're swimming in? Somebody in your group has to be able to do that. So again, look, I don't judge any people who find this difficult, because we need all of it. And, right now, there are reasons to be pretty afraid, I think, about where we're headed. And vigilance is really important. I think courageous citizenship absolutely includes, figure out where the protest needs to happen. Figure out what kind of ways that you can bring more attention to something that you think people are missing, for what you find nefarious reasons, whatever it happens to be. Just stay curious. That's it. It comes back to curiosity. Stay curious. If you think that there's no need for curiosity, you're wrong. Stay curious. Find a way. Designate somebody. Delegate it to somebody, right? Again, if you're the one that's good at the slogans, great. You do the slogans. You flatten everything down to a mobilizing word. Fine. But make sure someone else is able to ask the questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, we're all going to be pawns in somebody else's game.
I love that radical curiosity. I think if someone, one of the reasons that I think that I resonate so much with the way that your approach, Monica, is that I also see curiosity as maybe my number one defining value, and so I think that but this deep interpersonal curiosity and really a radical faith in a radical faith in the goodness of people. You see the fundamental goodness of of human beings, and a faith that goodness will be revealed through interrogation and understanding and empathy, I think is refreshing and radical in a way.
It is, and let me be clear. I know that for a lot of folks, this just doesn't have enough defense.
Yeah, right.
Wait, so okay, so we're gonna get curious and we're gonna ask questions, but if we don't fight hard enough, they are gonna destroy something. And like I said about the question about how do I bridge with people who think I just shouldn't exist or things like this, who just want me to whatever. This is an open question for me. I think that any approach, I mean, let me be humble, right? Any approach to anything has its drawbacks and its places where it's not necessarily giving satisfactory answers. And we know that in human history there has been war that by and large society has felt was justified. Okay. So then there's these awkward, uncomfortable questions about what that line is. So we all know that line exists. I have decided that I am going to work tooth and nail to do everything possible before thinking that we're at that line. Do you know what I mean? Because I think,
Yeah.
frankly, we're at that line when enough people think we are. There's no objective measure.
Yeah.
And what I see is a lot of delusions and misperceptions. Our thoughts rule, So we'll start killing each other when we think that we need to.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
So
There is those collective illusions. It's powerful, and so much of our interpersonal interactions are are guided by these expectations and these sort of cyclical I think that you think that I think kind of stuff.
exactly.
Yeah. Um Monica, what's something that you're excited about right now, or what's something that gives you hope in this particular moment, and what are you working on that you think will be, you know, relevant in the coming year, 2026 and beyond?
Mm, um, uh, what gives me hope right now that's coming up is how many people I talk to who are highly placed in these institutions that seem to be driving so much of the problem and the potential solutions. Elected officials, journalists, folks, leaders in various organizations who who say, "I know this is a problem. I just don't know what to do about it." You know, there's a side of that that's very discouraging. We're like, wait, but if you don't know what to do about it and you don't know what to do with the rest, what about the rest of us? Like, you're highly placed. But at the same time, I think that it's just a spark. It's like the kindling is being laid out and it's just the spark. When all these people kind of like peek forward from the line and notice each other and go, oh, wait, you too, you, well, let's go. Let's go. So that gives me a lot of hope is there's more of those people than people think. It's very difficult for them to get their real views out into a media that just loves conflict. It's just very difficult, but they're out there. And they're everywhere actually. There's a lot more. So I'm seeing the kindling. That's the hope. And then what I'm excited about in my work, boy, there's a lot of things, but the A Braver Way podcast, which is my podcast and has been a bit dormant for a year. We are working really hard to bring it back. I'm always really careful about any commitment. So I have to say, like, no guarantees, like we're still sure, blah, blah. I don't have a timeline, but
Uh-huh.
but I've got some pretty fun ideas brewing, and I'm grateful for the time we spent reabsorbing and taking stock after this year. These last many months have been, whew, they've shaken things up. And
Yeah.
so, our listeners are coming in with very different, just from very different places. And I think that the work has shifted. And I'm excited to put into action some of the ways the team is thinking we can be really, we can try to make a difference out there. So stay tuned. A Braver Way.
Okay, good to know. I'll put a
Hmm.
link. Is there a link that I can put to it on the?
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Wherever your podcasts are sold, not sold, but
Okay.
yeah,
All
they're
right.
available everywhere your podcasts. What is the line? There's a line. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I don't
Your
know.
favorite podcast platform. There you go. We're everywhere.
That's right. That's right.
That's the
Good,
one.
good. Okay. Well, I'll put it up there. Okay, last question, Monica. Is there anyone that you think that would be interesting for me to talk to that is in your orbit that you think could help move this conversation forward?
I think Greg Lukianoff is pretty amazing. Do you know
Mm,
of him?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's the head of the of FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, and I love Greg. I think he is a person with enormous integrity. I think the way he has led FIRE, a free speech organization in such a polarized time, is an absolute model to so many organizations that have felt tempted by one political side or another to just kind of fall in line with certain ideological priorities. FIRE has been relentless in its integrity for what it's really fighting for. So it's an organization I support. And again, Greg's leadership and intellect is astounding. So if you want to talk to him, he's got some amazing ideas about, honestly, like the freedoms, the liberties we need to protect to be able to talk to each other at all.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wonderful. Great. Well, I do know Greg. I know his work, and I've been following him for a while. So that's a great recommendation. Thank you for that. Anything else? Any closing thoughts before we sign off here, Monica?
It's just really nice to talk to you. I hope we
Likewise.
yeah, I know we've seen each other in person a time or two, and I hope we get to
Yeah.
cross paths again. Like, this was a fantastic conversation. Thank you for everything, all the questions. Questions are great. More questions.
Absolutely. Well, I totally enjoyed it, and you were delightful, and I had a lot of fun. So thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, you bet.